All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. So once again, my name is Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar, and thanks for joining me today for today's session, Breaking Down Silos, how to unify your supply chain with one platform. So before I dive into the presentation and the demonstration, let me go ahead and just cover a few housekeeping details. So today's session is scheduled to last 30 minutes. That does include Q&A. Now, you're going to be muted during today's presentation. However, you can submit questions via the chat feature. I'll leave a couple minutes at the end of today's presentation just to answer those as they've come over. If for some reason we do have an outage today, just wait for a minute and try to reconnect. You can do that in a couple of different ways. You can just refresh your screen, or you can go to the email where you received the invitation to today's webinar, re-click on that link, and it should bring you back into the session. If at any time you'd like to speak with one of our supply chain experts, or if you have any questions about Exostar, you can reach out to us a couple of different ways. You can email us at supplychain@exostar.com, or you can come to our website, www.exostar.com. There's a questions form there on every page that you can submit questions to, or there's a chat feature. You can also submit questions that way as well. Now, if one of your questions are, can I get a copy of today's slides or a link to today's recording? The answer is yes. You'll be receiving those as a follow-up to today's session. So you'll be getting a copy of today's slide deck and a link to the recording as part of today's follow-up. So when we talk about supply chain management in the aerospace and defense industry, we're really talking about managing that overall supply chain down to that nth tier. Today, we're going to particularly focus on cybersecurity requirements and other requirements because you may or you probably have contracts with the Department of Defense that require you to flow down certain contractual obligations down to your supply chain. And as part of that, you need a method to ensure that they're compliant with those requirements. So we're going to talk about how to do that and how to make it less of a manual process that you might be using today, how to automate that and make that part of your overall supplier intake before you start to work with that particular supplier. Now, what this will hopefully help you do is do a few different things. It's going to help you cut out manual processes that you may be doing today, saving time of your organization and your various employees to allow them to focus more on critical business issues that might be of importance to you. It also would allow you to stop those what are typically considered self-imposed disruptions. I'm no longer allowed to use these particular suppliers because they've fallen out of compliance with particular regulations, or these things require various renewals, reauthorizations, and how do I allow that to occur with less disruption, both in my organization and in the supplier organization. So what we're particularly talking about today is how do I manage the flow down requirements that I have because I'm in that aerospace and defense market. Because of that, I have requirements to flow down various things from defense federal acquisition regulations to my supply chain. I need to know that my supply chain is doing things in accordance with things like NIST 800-171. That's that DFARS clause 7020. As CMMC comes to take effect, that's that cybersecurity model certification requirements. As those things come into effect, and those are expected to start to show up in DFARS contracts later this year, how do I know that my supply chain is doing things in accordance with those flow downs that I have? There are a number of ones also that are part of that, but with all these cases, I've got to know what my organization is doing to ensure compliance across my supply chain. Now, additionally, there are regulations out there today. NIST 800-171 is one of those that changes over time. And one of those changes that we know of that's coming in NIST 800-171 is that we actually have to have a program in place to manage our supply chain risk. Now, this is how do I adjudicate, manage that overall program? How do I not only have a policy in place, but how do I actually implement it? And how do I show evidence that I've actually implemented that program? So what I'm going to show you today should help you address those things. Now, Exostar is going to focus on a few different key areas in working across your supply chain. Obviously, as I've already talked about, one of those is in the risk mitigation. How well do I know my supply chain? Do I know if they're in compliance with particular requirements? And if so, how do I understand where they are? So when I take a look at that overall organization that I'm working with, what can I do to mitigate any risk from them? And then also, how can I collaborate with my supply chain to ensure that we can not only communicate various changes on both sides, ones that I may have and various changes they may have, but also how do I just generally collaborate with that organization? And can I do that in a more automated manner, a more consistent manner, rather than just doing one-off emails, manual processes, where I'm relying on individuals to remember what they did or keep records of what they did, etc. So that's kind of the overall problem that we're trying to resolve and what Exostar can bring to the table to help you achieve these things. Now, the reason Exostar can do this is because we've been working within and across the aerospace and defense market for over 25 years. We were started by a number of the large primes out there, the Boeings, Lockheed Martins, Raytheons, Rolls-Royces, et cetera of the world, to allow their supply chains to better work together. Over those 25 years, Exostar has an extended and expansive network of primes and their suppliers within a community that's doing business every day. This community, as you see here, is over 52,000 organizations, almost of 250,000 of individual users. These folks today are working within and across the chain. The benefit that they have is that Exostar allows you to come into the network, and then because you're in the network, it allows you to get access to a number of different supply chain portals, other applications, collaboration tools, etc., where you can work more closely with those organizations that you have contracts with. This idea of connect once, collect once, and certify once is what I'm going to illustrate today when I show you the actual application, what Exostar calls our supplier management module, to our overall platform that allows you to do this across your particular supply chain. Now, this supplier management module fits into that overall Exostar platform. Many of you may be using this today, or you have credentials from Exostar that allow you access into the platform. And then once you have access into the platform, you have access to various applications that you're utilizing to work with various organizations out there. So for example, you may work with Boeing. And as part of that, you go into the Boeing supply chain portal. And to do that, you go in through Exostar. You enter a credential that was both proofed your organization as well as you as an individual. This proofing takes place and lets you into kind of that first layer of the Exostar community. It first proofs your organization and determine that your organization is not on a denied parties list, and it continues to check that throughout the life cycle of your organization's participation in the Exostar community. You then registered as an individual, and you typically go through a proofing process to prove that you are who you say you are, both that you work for that organization and that you are, Mary Smith, and you're given some kind of credential that then allows you access via multi-factor authentication to get access to that supply chain portal. Now, you may use this just with Boeing. You may use this with other Exostar supply chain portals like GE Aerospace, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, etc. You may also use this with third-party applications that those organizations are using to collaborate with you. You maybe use this to reach another Exostar application called Exostar's Managed Microsoft 365, where you're collaborating, in a Teams environment with those third parties. So a number of things. So this is, if you will, that front door to get access to these individual applications. But you can also use that supplier management module to kind of go another layer deep with your various supply chain partners. This module is what allows you to say, okay, well, I want to work with this particular partner, but before I work with them, I want to not just do, an organization check. I want them to provide to me information about their cybersecurity, their risk of breaches, things like that. I want to check whether or not, or I want to make sure they're compliant with various conflict mineral requirements and things like that. That kind of information, and many of you may be using this today, where you filled out what a CCRA form, a cybersecurity and risk assessment form, that was given to you by Lockheed Martin uses that form to gather this information. That was driven through Exostar supplier management module. What this does is it's going to allow you to leverage that community. So that collect once, certify once model of work is one thing that Exostar leverages across that community. So if you filled out this form for one organization, when another organization wants that same information, they're going to send you that same form back, but it's going to be pre-populated with the information you've already done. You're just going to review that information, make sure it's still right, and then resubmit that. So that connect once, certify once process is there. If for some reason your information is changed, and obviously these are programs that do change over time, it's going to notify everybody that's been provided that form that you've updated and let them review it accordingly. Overall, that provides you a faster time to onboarding those suppliers. It cuts out that manual step of continually sending out various reminders to people to please submit. This will automate that process. It'll allow you to do it in large bunches, so you can do this via a campaign module, which I'll show you in just a minute, which allows you to send this to up to 200 suppliers at one time, gather that information, and then take them through that process of onboarding them and giving them access to additional information or additional applications that you need to work with them. This can integrate directly into your ERP or into your customer master data to feed that information directly to your internal system, so you keep that up to date as well. So with that, let me go ahead and show you how this actually works. So this is Exostar Supplier Management Module. This provides us, if you will, a community of suppliers that we're working with. So that's why you see both my suppliers and all suppliers. My suppliers are those organizations my company is already working with here in the platform. All suppliers is Exostar's community. So if I wanted to see if there's an organization out there that I may not be working with yet, but determine whether or not they're yet an Exostar, I can search this community and I can get a return of all those organizations. I can decide if one of these are the new supplier I want to work with. And if so, I can send them information via actions here to get them started and add this company as a new supplier. At the end of the day, as part of my supplier onboarding, I want to know what their score is on a particular compliance worksheet, or I want to know if they comply with conflict minerals requirements and things like that. So, what I'm going to do is send them forms and information and get that information back. So I sent, a NIST 800-171 form to this supplier, and this is the information I receive back. So as one element of risk, I can determine if these folks meet my requirements of being compliant with NIST 800-171, and if their SPRS score is within my risk toleration of my compliance group in order to work with them. This tells me that these folks really aren't yet ready for a CMMC level 2. And so I'd want to know more information about that before I approve them on a contract that requires them to be compliant with NIST 800-171. The forms that I'm sending them have scorecards and these scores and things like that available as part of the overall form. So this allows me to quickly see and evaluate what I want to do with that organization. Now, the way I did this, right, I just showed you I could do this on an individual basis, but I could also do this via a campaign mechanism. And a campaign is when I want to bring on one or more suppliers. In that case, what I'm going to do is download a template, right? I could then go to my ERP and pull down suppliers in a particular format, right? That name, address, DUNS number, that kind of information, because we're going to compare that against the Exostar database to determine if these are new or existing. If they're new, we're going to have them come into the system, register into Exostar so we can do that first check, right? That denied parties list, the registration of the individual. Then we're going to give them the additional information that you want them to provide you. And then you're going to decide whether or not you want them to come in and be a new supplier for you based on the results of all that information you now have. So once we upload that form, right, that template of that list of users, we're going to start that campaign process. And the first thing it does is it's going to, show you that list against existing organizations. Whoops, that was not quite sure why that happened that way. Let's do it this way. This one worked before when I did it. Yeah, there we go. So this shows me those organizations. This one has 99 suppliers, 4 new, 1's existing, but it also returns some that need resolution. And that resolution is because these companies have a partial match with the Exostar community, but we're not sure if they're new or if they're existing. And how would you like us to handle those? So if I go to millimeter wave systems, I can decide what I want to do with this particular organization. I see that, this one doesn't really have another match that's even close in the Exostar system. So this is really a new organization. So we're going to mark it as that. and then this will be treated like that. You see, this is now a new supplier. It goes to that total. And when this campaign launches, we've designated that a CCRA form be sent to these 99 companies. And then we're going to track that campaign through its resolution. And the resolution of a campaign is getting access to us, right? That's when they're that approved supplier. And in the Exostar parlance, that typically means that they're now enrolled to get access to a particular organization or a particular application. So we can either assign a form to them, we can give them access into a particular application. So, once they complete the forms and we okay them, they're then, they're either in process, they're pending approval. Once they have approval, they're given access to the particular application or information that you want them to have to be part of your community. Right now, they're part of your supply chain. Now, this is tracked throughout that collection process. And so when you start to see these different campaigns, you'll be able to track them through. You'll be able to track how these people are being done, right? So that millimeter wave, it's provisioning that CCRA form to this particular individual in that organization to fill out. Now, some of these organizations, they've picked up the form, they've started to fill it out. Once they complete it, right, it comes over to us to be approved. When we sent that form, we had an approval process designated as well. Since this is a cybersecurity form, it's going to my compliance group. They're the ones who actually okay or disapprove or say, well, it's not, we're going to disapprove and we're going to give this reason. It's going to be shipped back to that organization and they're going to resubmit that information. Now, by default, Exostar provides 4 standard forms out of the box. It is the NIST 800-171 form. It's that CCRA form, that Cybersecurity Risk and Assessment form. There's a conflicts mineral form, and then just a basic intake form. Now, that information can be supplemented with other information you may want to gather. So, along with kind of the basic forms, those basic forms, you also have the ability to create new ones. This allows you to create a custom form, clone an existing form, and then add things to it. It allows you to, enable, upgrade, and configure or design that form so you can gather that information that you need to meet your particular organization requirements. Because this is a SaaS application, Exostar continues to continually improve this application. So as I mentioned, we have four forms that we're gathering information about today. We'll continue to update those existing forms. So when NIST 800-171 moves to R3, we'll update that form accordingly when the CCRA form is updated, but we'll also continually add additional information that wants to be gathered, including on those basic intake forms when our customers determine or let us know based on the feedback we have with them that, hey, I also need this kind of information. Now, this information goes back to an Exostar master data model. This allows those forms to be filled out by this organization. So, for example, Exostar LLC was given this form. Their CCRA was provided to them here. If we filled that out for others, we're going to get that information from that master data model. We're going to confirm that information and send it back. Now, if this form is expired, I can perform an action on my side to say, hey, let me email and send to my contact there, right? And this would give me the list of all contacts at that particular supplier, and I can choose who I want to mail it to. Need your form updated. Now, this is also the system itself is also sending out what I'd call these nag emails. So 30 days before expiration, they'll start to get that notification that they need to update their CCRA form. And that's going to be periodically set on, again, what you decide and the configurations that are set up when we establish this application for your use. So as we look to wrap up, just want to kind of remember and remind everybody. So this works across that Exostar network. That trusted supplier network has already been working with these organizations for a number of years. You get access to that today via your work with those organizations. And what we typically find in most of our organizations is we typically see a supplier match of somewhere between 50 and 70% of your existing supply chain are also there within the Exostar network. That will greatly improve your ability to onboard those suppliers quickly because you'll have access to that information and they'll have access to just provide that information to you again. Now, this works with Exostar's other supply chain applications, really no matter where you sit in that supply chain. So Exostar has supply chain portal applications like our supply line. These are those applications where you're going and collaborating around POs and other information with the large primes or even tier one primes that you're working with today. If you want to automate that process of going out to those different supply chain portals and bringing that information into your organization, we have another application called Demand Line, which would be on your side, which would pull this information from those various Exostar supply chain portals and automate that process of bringing that information directly to you. And we can work together with your ERP to populate those changes in demand directly into that ERP and automate that process as well. So I want to thank everybody for joining me today. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and just look to see if we had any questions come over while I was talking. I don't see any there. So I just want to thank everybody for your time and attendance. Hope this answered your questions. And if you have any more, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to answer those. Thanks so much for your time and have a great rest of the day.